The YouTube channel Maiorianus explores all things related to the late Roman Empire. I never thought I would see a history-focused channel explore such a specific time frame, but there it is, and I love it. He recently made this really interesting video titled "Did Art Decline in the Late Roman Empire?", where he explores the topic of the decline in quality of Roman art, particularly that in sculpture and coinage. Now, that is a very interesting topic, and I thought I would give a numismatist's perspective into the subject. After watching this video, make sure to give Maiorianus a visit and check his channel out. It's great. So what we'll do today is go on a quick tour throughout the history of the Roman Empire. Let's start at the golden age of Imperial Rome, analyze its art, and go through the subsequent periods of Roman history until the collapse of the Western Empire, and see how, when, or even if Roman art declined. Let's get started. To set a baseline of what many consider peak Roman artistry, we have to go to the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, when Rome was at its apogee. To illustrate that, I have bought a denarius of Emperor Trajan. At this point, we have this mix of the idealized beauty that was appreciated by the Greeks and the Roman tradition of manliness, of ultra-realism. As a result, throughout Trajan's life, we see this image of this middle-aged, experienced, but still full of energy general. Both his coinage and his statue are also made with exquisite detail, depicting even the smallest details, such as Trajan's thin lips. Here's another example, in this case a coin of Antoninus Pius, also made in line with the very well accomplished sculpture of the time. And if we turn this coin around, we have a young Marcus Aurelius. Once more, fine details on this coinage as well as on sculpture show how accurate 2nd century Roman artists were able to capture his true appearance, from his curly hair to his unusual bulgy eyes that will consistently be depicted on coins as well as sculpture throughout his life. We then get to the crisis of the 3rd century, this horrible, roughly 50-year period between 235 and 285 AD, when the empire almost collapsed and saw the debasement of the Roman coinage to truly pathetic levels. For that period, the best imagery we can look at to get an idea of how much the art on coins and sculpture deteriorated has to be during the reigns of Valerian, his son Gallienus, and Claudius Gothicus. I've heard quite a few collectors dismiss the coinage of these men and every Roman coin after this period as bad or unrealistic, but once you study the history of the period and the truly cataclysmic dimensions of the disaster that Rome faced, you will see how well Roman art actually endured during these dark decades. As for sculptures, we still have quite a few realistic busts that survived to our time. They definitely reflect a more austere style, different to the glorious full-body images of previous centuries, but the level of realism achieved is still respectable, as you can see on the screen now, while I show busts of Valerian, Gallienus, and Claudius II. Considering the time period they were living, these are pretty good pieces of art. On coinage, however, we have this interesting phenomena. The constant civil wars and invasions meant the once safe and reliable road network that allowed coins from the main mint of Rome to go all the way to the troops on the frontier was no longer available. And to solve that, a series of imperial mints were established closer to the frontier. In fact, mints were opened and closed all the time, and this created a great inconsistency on the portraiture depicted on the coins. The best way to look at this is with this coin of Valerian I'm showing here. This piece, struck at the Mint of Rome, is phenomenal. It's insane to think that even during such troubling times, this level of quality could still be achieved. But now, to compare, let's put this other piece on the screen. This is also a coin from Valerian, but as you can clearly see, it has a vastly different style. This piece comes from the Eastern mint of Samosata, very likely a mint established to help produce the required number of coins for the huge number of troops stationed next to the eastern frontier. As for his son Gallienus, let's put this Antoninianus of him on screen, as well as his marble bust from before to compare. Yes, maybe a bit more schematic in nature, but we still see a reasonable level of quality and likeness to his real image. Even if we switch to these later, highly debased coins, we can still recognize his image with certain ease. Remember, these coins were minted by the multiple millions every month. Once more, the simple fact that the coin struck for the average people in such dire times when artistry was not a priority for anyone still manages to show the emperor in recognizable ways, shows the resilience of Rome. As for Claudius Gothicus, here we have an example from the city of Cyzicus, as well as some other examples from different mints. As we can see, the fact that there was no unified minting authority, minting facilities in fact, meant that inconsistencies on the portrait quality became quite flagrant, despite certain characteristics of Claudius, like his well-defined jawline or his beard, can still be consistently recognized on every coin. But what truly surprises me about the coinage of this time is that still, in such bad times, master engravers existed. I have shown on my previous episode on the Gallic Empire, a separatist state that temporarily broke off from Rome during the reign of Gallienus. I've shown these marvelous gold ori struck under the usurper Posthumus. These coins were likely used as gifts for the local elites to gather support for Posthumus, and the sheer elegance of these facing portraits is, in my opinion, among some of the very best coins ever struck by the Romans. Here's another example of a facing bust, which the artist picked a different angle. Absolutely marvelous pieces of artistry in the middle of the 3rd century hell. But the empire managed to survive. The great Aurelian came, stitched the empire back together, and after him, a series of very competent emperors followed, such as Probus or Diocletian. Despite stabilizing the situation, however, the idea of multiple mints closer to the frontier, striking coins for the troops stationed at the vicinity, caught on, and this only deepened the differences in style between coins, between mints in fact. Here we have two coins struck under Emperor Probus, one in Rome and another one in Antioch. As you can see, very different styles. This is the time, sadly, that, at least personally, I would consider that coinage will clearly steer away from realism. I would personally date the year when coinage really stopped being realistic during Aurelian's reform of the coinage. So it happened in 271 AD. But to Aurelian's defense, his reasons to simplify the imagery on coinage were noble, as he was attempting to remove from circulation all of the bad, greatly debased coins from the previous decade and replace them with his new, heavier, better 5% silver coins. This required a colossal number of coins being made, a massive number of dies being cut, and realism or any consistency in appearance and style between mints was simply not a priority. To illustrate this, the best thing we can do is to look at multiple coins of different emperors struck at the same mint. For this, I have picked the mint of Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon in France. This mint is, in my view, very good. It produced very good portraits. So let's put on screen now coins from Emperor Aurelian and some later emperors. As we can see, it's not like the individuality of each emperor is particularly gone. I mean, for example, as you can see, Emperor Tacitus, for example, is clearly distinctive. Emperor Carus's receding hairline also clearly marks him apart, but we can appreciate that the formula for depicting emperors becomes this basic portrait, where you just add some features and fine-tune it to each emperor. You make it a bit fatter, maybe change the face a bit, add some hair or remove some hair, but sadly the individuality of each emperor is clearly starting to vanish. We then get to the Tetrarchy at the very late 3rd century and the age known as the Dominate. This is a very interesting moment for Roman art in general. During this period, the empire, but especially the imperial institution, transformed itself into a completely autocratic state. The 4 emperors were seen differently compared to emperors of previous centuries. Instead of a special but mortal man, the first among equals, the first citizen, the emperor became a figure associated with the divine, a distant, abstract image of power, and this led to a different way of depicting the emperor in sculpture and coinage. The best example to illustrate this is the statue of the Tetrarchs. You can still visit this statue in Venice. It used to be in Constantinople, but you can blame the Venetians and the Fourth Crusade for that. This statue shows a purely idealized image of the 4 emperors. They are indistinguishable from one another. And this was made on purpose, to show them not as individual men, but as part of an institution. A man that was part of a bigger, all-encompassing state. And the coinage of the period reflects this visual change. Here we have a numus, a new denomination instituted during the Tetrarchy, showing Constantius I, one of the Tetrarchs. As we can see, it is a completely schematic image, without any traits that distinguish him from his other 3 colleagues. This particular example is also from the Mint of Lugdunum. And here we have another coin, in this case of Emperor Diocletian, struck at Antioch. Once more, completely schematic busts. The fact these coins are so common nowadays implied that they were struck in truly enormous numbers. So, not only the whole idea of these coins was for them to be as generic looking as possible, but the sheer demand of carving so many dice to strike so many coins meant that not a lot of time could be dedicated to give them any kind of individualized portraits. However, and this is an interesting twist to the whole idea of abstract images, we do have marble busts from the emperors of the time that depict them in a very realistic fashion. Look at the portraits I have on screen now. These are Diocletian and Constantius I, the same emperors I showed you in coin format. In my view, this shows that the whole idea that the empire never recovered its artistic merit is simply not true. They were capable of art, good art. What seems to be the case is that 2 separate artistic styles existed side by side. Maybe less refined, but still quite high quality realistic style, reminiscent of the old art style of the early empire, and the new abstract looking style meant to be used as imperial propaganda, which in a sense dehumanized the emperor, transforming him in an icon, an idea, a god on earth that embodied the idea of the Roman state. We will continue to see these 2 parallel art styles on the later empire, during the Constantinian dynasty and beyond. We can still find realistic images of important figures, such as these busts of Constantine's partner and eventual rival Licinius, and this full-sized statue of Emperor Julian that I'm placing on screen right now. As for coinage, however, the abstract style will become the rule. Here we have a coin of Emperor Licinius, and as you can see, it is completely schematic. From his disproportionate massive head, his bulging eyes, nothing here makes any reference to how the real man looked like. But we also have some interesting instances when both styles mix together. Here we have the Colossus of Constantine, or sadly what is left of it. If you ever visit Rome, when you go to the Capitoline Museum, right at the entrance, there's this small courtyard. You simply can't miss it. There it is, this massive, head of Constantine, made with clearly the abstract style that I mentioned, from the disproportionate, huge eyes gazing upwards, almost like if searching for some divine intervention, to the very heavy-looking jawline. This head of Constantine is a statement of power, of force, but also of divine providence, of divine inspiration and connection to some sort of higher being. However, there are two parts of this statue that survived, and people don't pay a lot of attention to them, but they're worth looking into. His hand and the fragment which seems to be the joint between his biceps and his forearm. We could make an argument that a hand and an arm are easier to make than a face, but they are rendered in extremely realistic and well-proportioned style. I mean, look at the hand, it's masterfully made. This implies at least that whoever worked on this statue was capable of making a realistic image of Constantine, but was likely instructed to instead use the abstract style for the face. Another fragment of another Constantine statue, this time in bronze, shows a forearm and a hand made in exquisite refinement, with details such as the veins protruding from the skin. This requires some serious artistic skill, particularly if we consider this was a bronze statue, which was harder to make than simply sculpting a rock. Which conclusions can we achieve from these observations? Well, I would argue that the empire slowly declined from the 2nd century to the 4th. It did indeed lose a bit of its artistic shine when compared to its golden age, but Roman artists all the way into the very late into the empire history, and I mean around the 4th century AD, were still capable of realistic and high quality artistry. And the move to more abstract imagery was mostly a deliberate move instead of a loss of competence. But it is undeniable that as the empire entered its final decades, a real decline in art had to happen, simply due to societal collapse. Here we have a coin of Emperor Gratian. All coins of the very late empire will have the same generic portrait like this one. You might have slight differences, some special issues where the emperor is shown holding a spear, but sadly, by this time, coin art was a pale shadow of what it used to be. Still, considering all of the existential crises that the Romans endured throughout their history, the quality of their artistry maintained very good levels for a very, very long time. So there it is, a quick and comprehensive analysis where we try to pinpoint when did Roman art decline. What do you think? When do you think Roman art on coins reached its peak? When did it begin to decline? Let me know your ideas in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really helps the channel. So happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.